you, Mary. What a nice introduction. I am very touched. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here tonight and for Mary for inviting me. My name is Brenna Marsachek. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach with Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. We used to be called Madison Audubon Society and changed our name recently. I'm going to share my screen here so that we can look at some pictures of birds. And I'm familiar with the work of Wild Ones, but I'm very happy to, here we go. Okay, so I'm familiar with the work of Wild Ones, and I'm really glad that as people who primarily love plants, as I do, I mean, the secret might come out tonight that my first love is plants. You know, this is something that's relevant for all people, especially people who are really interested in conserving natural species, native species in our areas. So I'm really grateful that you're here tonight to talk about this. And, you know, we have a fairly small group. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to jump in and ask them, and I'll do my best to answer them. I love interaction and not just talking at you for an hour. So please do jump in if you have questions. So before we get started, usually when I give this presentation, it's in person, but if you can, raise your hand if you have seen or heard a bird hit a window at your place, at your house. So I'm seeing a few hands, not all of them. Okay, great. For those of you who have your hands up, that is extremely common. That's usually the answer I get is, usually it's 100% of the people in the room have seen or heard a bird hit a window at their house or apartment or wherever. But if you haven't, that's great. And I want to learn your secrets. So let's get started really quick with a brief introduction to Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. So our offices are based out of Madison, Wisconsin. And our mission is primarily focused around bird conservation through 3 different avenues. One is habitat restoration. So we own and manage and steward 2,500 acres of land in Southern Wisconsin, and we're actively restoring or have restored all of those acres to native habitats. Most of the properties we own are open to the public any day of the year, and they're great places to bird and enjoy native plants in large expanses and landscape level. So if you are interested in taking a little journey up to Madison, you'd be very welcome in our sanctuaries. We also have an education program where our educators go to classrooms and community centers to share a love of nature with youth. And they work exclusively in schools and community centers where at least 50% of the students are students of color or are on free or reduced lunch, which is part of our way to make sure that people who have been historically excluded from conservation are able to enjoy the wonderfulness of nature. And we also have a strong advocacy component of our mission. So we do this work through alerting our members when there's legislation that matters to them and to birds. We do a lot of citizen science programming, a lot of outreach and public education. So that's our mission in a nutshell. And all of this work is done in Southern Wisconsin. So if you can see this map here, it shows 10 counties where we work. This is our service area. And we do a lot of the stuff that we do is in Madison for field trips and whatnot, but many of our citizen science programs span across these 10 counties and beyond. So that's Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. But now let's transition to birds and window collisions. So we'll start tonight by talking about who really cares about birds, like if some birds are dying at windows, right? Like what does that matter? And I'll start by saying that birds just by themselves bring a lot of joy to life. There have been studies done that have documented a significant improvement to mental well-being as well as physical health when there are birds near people and people can see and hear birds. They bring a lot of joy, they bring a lot of relationships and a lot of connections. It's really fun to watch with people you know and to share this love with your kids or your neighbors, or to just enjoy it on your own. So birds make life better. They're also really important for ecosystem services. So you can see a hummingbird here pollinating. Pollination is an important thing that hummingbirds in particular do in Wisconsin. They are also, birds in general are really important for seed distribution. They eat a lot of insects and arachnids and other critters. They are also eaten by other animals, so they're a really important part of the food web. And they're also a very important ecosystem or economic driver. So birding is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States. And sales of binoculars and bird guides and, you know, restaurant visits and hotel stays when people are traveling and exploring and birding in the process is something that's really important for the upper Midwest with all of our different habitat types. As well as elsewhere. So birds really matter for a lot of different reasons. And what we're here to talk about tonight is one of the main ways that birds face significant challenges, and that has to do with window collisions. So this graphic that you see here shows 3 different sizes of buildings, and each of them has an amount of birds that they, like a number of birds that they kill and a percentage of the problem that that size building represents overall. So every year in the United States alone, up to 1 billion birds die. Every year, 1 billion birds in the United States. This graphic here says 599 million. This is also about 10 years old now. And you know, more buildings and more glassy buildings have been constructed since then, and this is also, the 599 million is a conservative estimate. So recent studies show that up to 1 billion birds die every year in the United States after hitting windows. So a lot of people think that skyscrapers are the big problem, right? Like these really tall buildings that have a ton of glass, those must be what's causing all of this. And it's true that skyscrapers kill a lot of birds. So each skyscraper kills about 24 birds per year, compared to a home that kills 2 per year on average. However, there are relatively few skyscrapers on the landscape. So skyscrapers actually account for only 0.1% of the problem. Almost half of the collisions, half of the approximately 1 billion birds that die every year happen at homes. So this is about 44% of the problem, and it's a factor of how many homes are on the landscape. So, you know, I think that this is really shocking. Like the first time I learned this, I was very disturbed, but it's also, I think, really empowering, because homes are places that we have the most control over out of all of the buildings that we interact with, right? And so this is something that we can do something about. We can make an adjustment at our homes, and by doing that, we can fix this problem instantly, as soon as a window treatment goes up. So how does this problem relate to other problems that humans cause for birds? I mean, we cause quite a few, right? But this graphic here, or this graph here, shows that the #1 bird death, the reason that birds die directly because of humans is because of outdoor cats, right? So these are house cats that get outside, barn cats, feral cats that kill over 2 billion birds every year. They are adorable. I love cats. And they're also ferocious hunters. So #1 is cats, and right behind it is window collisions. So this is the #2 cause of bird deaths that we as humans are responsible for directly. So what about windows and birds is so problematic. Like, why is that combination so deadly? Part of it has to do with the physiology of a bird, right? So if you look at this bird here, this is an American redstart, which is a species of warbler. So they're very small, songbird, long distance migrant, and her eyes are on the sides of her head, right? And that is typical for songbirds because they need to be able to see when predators are coming, but it certainly changes the way that they perceive depth and when they're approaching something solid. Birds also have hollow bones, which makes them light enough that they can fly. But it also means that if they hit something hard, the likelihood that they'll be injured so badly that they would die is much higher. They also don't have the benefit of speaking our language, right? So we learn from a young age that when we look at something like this, where there's a metal or a wood rectangle on the outside, but you can see through it, that this is a window, right? And it's usually the frame that tells us that there's glass there. So we've learned from a young age that something within a frame is hard glass. And even still, we have people that run into windows and glass doors, right? Like, that's with some training. Birds don't have that benefit of learning what these things are, being taught what they are. And birds are also, especially songbirds, they migrate at night. So most of the songbirds that we have in Illinois and Wisconsin that are long distance migrants will fly in the dead of night when there are relatively few predators around. It's a way to avoid predation while they're migrating. And they have to be able to see where they're flying. So if it's a cloudy night, they'll fly underneath the cloud cover, which puts them more in line with where buildings are. And it also brings them closer down to where there are lights. And lights are very confusing for birds. We'll talk about that in a moment. But as they're migrating at night, they're using a ton of energy by doing this. When morning comes, they need to rest and refuel. And so they come down from migration, and this is what they see, right? They see lots of new things around them that they're not familiar with. And most importantly, they may see something that is within a rectangular frame that we know is a reflection, but what they see is a tree that has a place to rest or some insects to eat or a place to hide from a predator. And so they'll try to fly at this tree and instead they hit the glass. A lot of collisions happen during foraging time in the morning, very early in the morning when the birds are just down from migration and they are trying to rest and refuel and sometimes escape from predators. Another problematic arrangement of windows or reason that windows are problematic is this illusion that there is clear sky to fly through. When you have a pane of glass that runs parallel to another pane of glass, it creates what's called a pass-through effect. And so it looks like one would be able to fly straight through an area like this enclosed glass walkway, when in fact that is a hard piece of glass there. So in colder climates, we often have these. In fact, I'm sure in warmer climates too, where they don't want to be outside when it's 120 degrees or whatever. But in colder climates, we definitely have these glass walkways or four-season patios where it might be glass enclosed. And even in just the most modest house, like my house, we have a spot where you can see through the windows in my living room and right out the back patio door into the backyard. And so many houses have these pass-through effects. And it takes a little bit of just walking around your house to see if you can find them. And you may not, but many houses do have something like this. And we also have found in our citizen science program that looks at this problem that glass walkways, skywalks, are a hotspot for collisions. So we often find many birds that have died due to those skywalks. And then having lights on at night, there's no super solid scientific reason why birds are so attracted to light, but they are. And so they come near light as they're flying at night. And even if they don't hit the glass as a result of that, they can oftentimes just fly around near it until they exhaust themselves, which can lead to an increased chance of predation, or they can actually die from exhaustion. So, as people who appreciate yards and gardens and landscapes that support wildlife, we need to be conscious of how our landscaping affects birds in relation to window collisions as well. So you can see this very nice yard. It has a lot of big glass windows, and it has a lot of things that would draw a bird into them. So water features are another way that this is a problem that we need to be aware of. To have something that is very tantalizing next to glass is problematic. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay, so in the Madison area, we have a program called the Bird Collision Corps, which is a group of volunteer citizen scientists that every spring and fall, they go out each morning and survey for evidence that birds have hit windows. And they document those, they collect the birds if they're dead, or they bring them to the rehab facility if they're alive. And at the end of that survey period, we have a nice collection of data that shows when and where and which species were affected by window collisions in that time period. And then over time, we're able to have some really solid data to give the building owners to say, this is a problem area, this is what we recommend you do about it, and work with them on finding solutions. So each morning before 9:30, our volunteers spend usually between a half an hour and an hour completing their surveys. They have a protocol to follow when they're documenting window collisions, and then bringing the birds into the freezer area. At the end of each survey period, we cross-check all of the species so that we make sure our data set is really clean and we know exactly which birds were affected by this. And then we're able to share the results with our volunteers in the community and the building owners in particular with mitigation suggestions. So I just said all of that. Here's some more pictures. So this building that you can see here on the left is one that's on the UW-Madison campus. And this wall is, I believe, 4 stories, all glass. And that one spot kills as many birds as the rest of campus. It's very hard for volunteers emotionally to do this work, but it's also really, really important because then we can work toward making some changes. So this building here is the one that's on our list now for having a window treatment applied. And our volunteers, through all of this work, have found that these are the top 9 species that are affected by window collisions in the Madison area. So as you can see from here, some of these birds are our favorite species, right? We have ruby-throated hummingbirds and cedar waxwings and great warblers and sparrows and woodpeckers, and it's big birds and small birds, and most of them are long-distance migrants. Juncos are here just for the winter. Many of them are here just for the summer, and even some year-round residents. Like there are some robins and mourning doves that overwinter in Madison, and I'm sure in your area of Illinois as well. So lots of diversity in the victims of window collisions, but I think importantly, it's important to notice that these are all songbirds, right? Like we have very few raptors, or once in a while we'll get a turkey. I think we got our first woodcock last fall, so it's very rare to have something besides a songbird. And songbirds are these birds that many of us tend to hold in highest esteem. So again, bringing all of this back to the central idea of why we're here tonight. A lot of birds die every year, and almost half of them happen at home. So what can we do about it, right? Like, we're gonna shift now from this whole like doomsday story into the motivation story of what we can do about it and how to do that. So at home, when you're thinking about putting up a window treatment so that you can reduce window collisions, there are two things you need to focus on, right? You want to reduce the transparency and you want to reduce the reflection. So transparency would be those pass-through effects where you have a bird trying to go all the way through one side to get out the other side. And then the reflection would happen on the outside of the glass where some tree or bird bath or gorgeous garden that you have is reflected in the glass and the bird's trying to get to it. So to start, you have to figure out which windows are the problem windows. It's very likely that it's not all of the windows in your house, that it's maybe one or two. So if you already know which windows are your problem windows, start there. If you don't know, pay attention, because you will hear, if you have a problem, you'll hear the thumps and you'll find the birds. So start with the windows that you know are problematic first. And the next step, of course, is to figure out what you're going to put up on your windows, right? Find a style that you like, that you know works well. I'll give you some resources to know whether it works well or not. And, you know, if you find a style that you like, ideally you only put it up once because you keep it up forever. And that benefits you. You don't have to do the same job twice. And it also benefits birds because it stays up and creates that visible space for glass. Whatever window treatment you use, it should follow the 2-inch rule, which is that whatever is on your glass is no more than 2 inches away from the next thing that's on your glass. There's one exception to this that we'll talk about, but if you have dots on your glass, the dots should be 2 inches apart. And if you have stripes on your glass, they should be 2 inches apart, no more. And that's because birds are super acrobatic. They'll try to fly through spaces that are even just a little bit bigger than that. And in particular, birds like ruby-throated hummingbirds will try to get through those spaces because they're so small. Ideally, whatever window treatment you use will go on the outside of the glass. So this both reduces the transparency, that see-through, pass-through effect, and it also, importantly, reduces the reflection, right? If you have the window treatment on the outside of the glass, it breaks up the reflection that the bird sees, and they see it's not actually a tree that they can get to. And then once you have your window treatment up, ideally that takes care of the problem. But if it doesn't, then repeat the process on whatever window still is problematic. So how do we know that something is bird safe, right? Like Mary talked about how she tried something, didn't work, felt frustrated, right? Like many of us have had this experience. Many of us have seen those hawk silhouettes for sale at Walmart and tried them out and it doesn't do anything. So what the heck, right? Like, how do you know if it's bird safe? Fortunately, there is an organization called American Bird Conservancy. They're a national nonprofit and they've done a ton of research on this issue. So they use something called a glass testing tunnel. There are 2 of these in the United States, and both of them are at bird banding stations. They look like this. So there are these long sheds that have an opening with a researcher on one side and an opening with glass on the other side. And one panel of glass has a window treatment on it, and the other panel has nothing. So it gives the illusion that the bird can fly right through. And then in front of both panels of glass is a mist net to be able to catch the bird. So no birds are injured in this process. So the people who are banding birds, they take their measurements, they band the bird, they do what they need to do for their research project. They take the birds that are least stressed out, they bring them to the tunnel, and they send the bird down the tunnel one time. And based on where that bird chooses to fly, whether it's flying toward the window treatment, I mean, that's not a good thing because that means that the window treatment didn't work. The bird didn't see it. Or if they're flying toward the plain glass, researchers document that, and then over time, they're able to come up with a material threat factor. So the lower the material threat factor, the safer it is for birds, because that means out of maybe 100 times that a bird flew down the tunnel, only one time did it fly toward the window treatment. So the solutions that I'm going to show you now all have a material threat factor that are very low, and they're all things that people like, that I know a lot of people around us anyway have used, and they really like them. So that's why I'm presenting the ones that you'll see here tonight. There are literally hundreds, probably thousands of options that you can choose from. And American Bird Conservancy has a database of all of them. So you could go through their list. They've tested all of them. They have assigned a material threat factor to all of them. So if you don't like what you see tonight, you can get on their website, go through their list, and find one that you do like, that you feel comfortable with that material threat factor. Okay, so the first solution that we'll talk about is the good old-fashioned insect screen. This thing is one of the most effective window treatments there is. It has a material threat factor of 1. So insect screens are really good at reducing the reflection. You can see in the picture on the left that there's a very clear difference between the window that has the screen on it and the one next to it that doesn't. And they also offer like a little bit of bounce. If a bird does hit it, then it isn't a hard surface immediately, right? They kind of bounce off. It's like a little bit of a trampoline, probably less fun. So if you have some insect screens hanging out in your basement, I encourage you to put those up. You already paid for them. A lot of windows already have them installed. If you have a casement window, so a crank out window, it's likely that your screen is on the inside, in which case you would probably still need a window treatment on the outside of the glass if that's your problem window, because the insect screen will not break up the reflection on your casement window if the screen is on the inside. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the next thing that we'll talk about is this tempera paint or oil-based markers. So this is for the more artistic folks. This is really fun to do with kids especially, and it's really fun if you like to change the look of your windows based on the season, or, you know, up here I say the Badger games, but whatever sports team you like to follow, or whatever the case might be that you want to have a design focused on. So tempera paint is washable paint. You can buy a container of it at a craft store for $3. It comes in all sorts of colors. So you can just design whatever you want to on your glass. It'll wash off and you can redo it. Regardless of, so when you're thinking about your design, you want to make sure that you're following the 2-inch rule, right? So if you have your hummingbird, you know, I'm looking at this part of the design here where the hummingbird is a little far away from this flower and the leaf. Maybe you want to add a little extra dot there just to make sure that you're covering your bases with that 2-inch rule where everything's no more than 2 inches apart. If your window that you have tempera paint on is exposed to the elements and it rains, your paint will look a little sad, right? It'll start to droop and you probably will want to take it down and wash it off and put something else up. Oil-based markers are nice in the sense that they don't droop, you know, they don't melt after a rainfall, but it takes acetone to get it off of your window. So, you know, pros and cons with that. But these can be very effective. The material threat factor on these is variable because it depends on how you put it up, right? If you're following the 2-inch rule, these are very effective. If you have it really spaced out, then it would be less so. So they can't really assign a material threat factor to this one. Okay, so the next one here is a very popular option. These are dots or tiny squares that come in a strip. I'm sorry, I usually have one of those handy and I don't have one here tonight. But it comes in basically like a roll of tape, like Scotch tape almost. And the dots are stuck to the tape. So you clean your window really well. You measure down 2 inches, you unroll the tape, stick it to your window, press all those dots on, and you pull the tape back and just the dots remain. It's very clever. They have it so that the dots are spaced out by 2 inches already. So then you just measure down 2 inches and you do the whole thing again. And it takes, an afternoon or a weekend, depending on how big your window is. But these are very effective. They have about a 7 material threat factor. And a lot of people really like the look of them. They're a great conversation starters. So when you have people over and they ask you what it is, you can tell them about the problem of window collisions. And it's one of those things where a lot of people ask, do you notice the dots when you're in your living room and you want to look outside? Do you notice the dots? Is it obnoxious? And you notice them, like you see them, but it's sort of like an insect screen where your eyes really quickly learn to look past it. And eventually you just sort of stop seeing them. So everybody's different, of course. That may not be the case for you, but a lot of people I talk to really like these dots. So one option for getting these dots is a company called Feather Friendly. They sell boxes that have enough tape in them to cover 16 square feet of glass. So like a 4x4 window. And they run about $25. So we have a coupon code that expires tomorrow, actually. So you'll have to act fast if you want to get these, at least, to get the 10% off. So you can go to this website, shop.featherfriendly.com, and then you can use that coupon code. And yeah, they work very well. They're, pretty attractive. They have white dots and black dots. Another company that makes them is called Kaleidoscape. Maybe I'll write that in the chat here quick. Oh, someone asked, where can you purchase these dots? That's where, Kaleidoscape. Is the other company that sell these. In the Madison area, the Wild Birds Unlimited sells them in person, but it's not very common to find these. You will not find these at just a box store. So you have to go out of your way to get them. Okay, so that's dots. Does anyone have any questions about dots so far, or insect screens or tempera paint? Feel free to unmute and ask if you do. Okay, great. We will charge on. So the next style of window treatment, I think this is the last one I have in here too, is called a paracord or Zen or Acopian bird saber curtain. So these are curtains that are made out of parachute cord. And parachute cord it's called paracord, and it's like a slippery nylon material. So each cord goes next to each other in this curtain, but they don't get all tangled up in the wind because the material that they're made out of is slippery enough that it doesn't get all caught up. So paracord is really great for weathering in this climate as well. So in the winter, they don't get, gunked up and torn down by ice. They're fine in the rain. They're good in the heat. They can last in the wind. So they're a really nice option. Oh, I'm sorry. One thing I wanted to mention about these dots too is that they last a long time. So they're rated for about 10 years on the windows. And I've heard of buildings that have had them up for 40 years and are still going strong. So these are also like the paracord. That's what made me think of it. They're also rated for UV and heat and snow and wind and rain and pressure washers and all sorts of stuff. So that's that. Okay, back to paracord curtains. So the idea with this is that you have, okay, before we move on, I'll answer Jane's question. How do you wash windows by hand over the dots? They're very flat against the glass. So you can wash your windows and You know, it depends on how you wash them. If you use a squeegee, it may be different than if you use a towel or, as my grandma would do, a newspaper to dry your windows. Um, you know, they typically don't leave a little trail underneath the dot. So you can wash your windows and they'll still look nice. Okay, any other questions about dots or otherwise? Okay, paracord. So you have a string of paracord or something that runs horizontally across the top of your window. And then to that, you string a piece of paracord down and you just go the whole length across the window. And you want the paracord to cover the full extent of the window. So from the top all the way down to the bottom of the window and then from left to right. You can see in here that these are spaced out more than 2 inches, right? So this is the exception to that 2-inch rule. Because the paracord is 3-dimensional and it's not attached to the glass, that means it's kind of pushed out a little bit away from the glass, and also it's often moving with the wind. It's dynamic. Birds see it differently. You know, if they're flying toward it, the look and the shape of it changes. And so you can get away with spacing them out a little bit more because of that. So these can be spaced 3 or 4 inches apart. So to do these, you can either make them. We have a handout that I can email to Mary, and maybe Mary can share it with all of you if you're interested. There's a handout that offers some instructions, but also Acopian bird savers, the guy who invented these, his name is Jeff Acopian, and from what I can tell, they just want to save birds. So they'll sell you a kit. If you measure your window and put your dimensions in, they'll pre-make your kit for you. They'll cut it, pre-shrink it, melt the ends, tie it all up, send it to you in a box, and all you do is put it up on your window. Or they give you instructions on how to make your own. You don't have to buy it from them at all. And what you make on your own would be exactly what you buy from them. So I think that's pretty cool. The paracord itself, you can buy in a craft store or you can buy it online. I bought a big spool of it. I think it was 1,000 feet for like 25 bucks online. So you can use kind of whatever color you want as long as it's high contrast. So a dark color or a bright color probably, or a lighter color anyway. And this one also has a coupon code if you're interested, for if you want to buy your own or a pre-made kit. You can go to the website that is here, birdsavers.com, and then use the coupon code that's listed here for 15% off before tomorrow. But if you're going to make your own, the best tip I can give you is to pre-shrink your paracord. So that means you put your paracord into a hot bucket of water, you let it sit for about an hour, and then you pull it out and you string the paracord around the bucket, or in some arrangements that you can let it dry. And the reason you would string it around a bucket is so that it would dry straight without any kinks in it. So so that allows for you to measure your paracord and cut it to the length of your window. And when you hang it up outside and it rains for the first time, if you pre-shrink it, then it won't shrink up a few inches. That can happen if you don't pre-shrink it, right? Like you measure it, you put it up, and then it lifts up a few inches after it rains for the first time. So these are really fun. They're really effective. I have a friend who has these curtains up. My friend Susan, who took these pictures, she had a red-breasted nuthatch hit her window, and that's her favorite bird. She had enough collisions, and then that one hit, and she's like, okay, I need to do something about this. I like the look of these paracord curtains. I'll make one of these. And so she put it up, and for 2 years, she didn't have any collisions. And then she got her house painted. So she had to take her paracord curtain down, and within 45 minutes, a bird hit her window. So, you know, they're very effective. A lot of people like the way that they kind of sway. That's why one of their nicknames is Zen Curtain. You know, it's kind of hypnotic to to watch them sway in the wind and the breeze. So they're a nice option. A lot of people really like them. Okay, so what do we do? How do we be conscious about our feeders and our gardens in order to make sure that our yards, whether or not we have a window treatment up, is being cognizant of this window collision problem? And really, I think this is important for all gardeners and people who feed birds. This is something we should all be thinking about, right? Because we are intentionally drawing birds into our yards, and it's a little cruel, unfair, of course unintentional, but certainly unfair for the birds to then hit a window and die after we brought them in, right? So this is about responsible bird feeding and gardening for wildlife. So there's a 3 or 30 rule. And the idea with this is that whatever it is that the bird would be attracted to, if it's a bird feeder or bird bath or like a really nice part of your garden, it should be closer than 3 feet or more than 30 feet away from your house. And this is because if the bird feeder, for example, is closer than 3 feet to your house and the bird flies from the feeder and hits a window, it's not going fast enough to kill itself or hurt itself. If it's more than 30 feet away, then it would be less likely to come at your house anyway. It's just, you know, there are other things in between the house and the feeder that it would probably want to go toward. So 3 or 30, and regardless, if there is a big window near a bird feeder, it should get treated. We should be treating our windows if they're near a bird feeder, right? So as you can see here, this person has Acopian bird savers up on their windows, and they also have 3 bird feeders on the outside. So I don't know how well you can see that, but there are bird feeders right out there. And this house hasn't had any window collision since they put up their paracord curtains. So they can be very effective. What isn't so effective are these silhouettes or like a single shape of a bird. You can buy these at, you know, on Etsy or at box stores. In order for these silhouettes or shapes to be effective, they would have to follow the 2-inch rule, right? And if you're following the 2-inch rule with that black hawk, you have so many of those silhouettes on your window that it's not a window anymore, right? There are much better, effective, cost-effective ways to put up a window treatment that really work, that still allow you to use your window as a window. There are also some like little square vinyl things that have UV features built into them. You may have seen those. Those can be effective, but not all birds see in UV. So, you know, it's a minimally, you know, it can work, but it's not ideal. So that's another case where there are other better things out there. And then, you know, putting your window treatment on the inside of the glass, as we talked about with having your treatment on the outside of the glass, that really does the best job of minimizing the reflection and the transparency. If the window treatment is on the inside of the glass, you're doing a great job of reducing that transparency, but the reflection will still show up on the outside. So in some cases, you can't help that, right? Maybe you live in a condo or an apartment building, or you can't access the glass on the outside. In that case, if you can put up a window treatment on the inside, draw your shades, whatever the case is, that is certainly better than nothing, and we'll go some distance, but outside is ideal. Okay, so then the last thing we'll talk about is, you know, I mentioned the Bird Collision Core program and our citizen scientist volunteers that are studying window collisions in Madison. And this group of people and the data that they've collected has made a really big difference in Madison. So you can see that there are dots applied to this window because this building on campus is a 6-story residential hall. It's called Ogg Residence Hall. on campus for, you know, freshmen and sophomores to live in. And we found this to be a hotspot for bird collisions. Not surprising, given that there's a lot of pass-through effect going on here, right? So we put up a window treatment here, and it has reduced the number of collisions by about 90% at this site. And you know, if you look at the data here, it shows that there was an average of 10 collisions before the treatment and 1 after. That doesn't sound like many. 10 collisions doesn't sound like many, but this is just a snapshot in time. You know, this is just 6 weeks of surveying. And there are also a number of scavengers that would take dead birds away. And there are like lots of times where a volunteer may not find a bird. And so these are very conservative estimates that, you know, we're working with. So 90%, approximately 90% reduction in window collisions. And so there are other examples of these window treatments where we've put them up at different spots that we've surveyed that have had similar tremendous reduction in window collisions. But then on a larger scale, this data really influenced the first bird safe glass ordinance in Wisconsin, in Madison. So in 2020, the city of Madison passed an ordinance that said that buildings that are 10,000 square feet or more using a certain amount of glass have to use bird safe glass or change their design to be less deadly for birds. So this went into effect October 1st, 2020. Not surprisingly, the city was almost immediately sued by a developer group, and the Dane County judge upheld the ordinance in 2022. The developer group appealed that ruling. It went to a state court, which upheld the ordinance in summer of 2023. And in fall of 2023. And so because of that state level decision that this ordinance was fair and square, it is now in the clear. It is out of legal battle, and other municipalities can follow suit. And in fact, you know, one since then has. Middleton, which is a suburb of Madison, adopted an identical ordinance just in February of this past spring. So, and there are a number of other municipalities in Wisconsin that are working on similar ordinances. So it's very exciting. You know, this is a citizen science project. These are just regular people collecting data that have made this really amazing impact. So I think it's really cool and inspiring. And as you drive around Madison, you can see examples of this now, you know, because this ordinance went into place in 2020. So buildings that are going up now are very glassy still, because, you know, that's the style, but a lot of them are using dots that are baked or etched into the glass during the production phase of glass. So this is not stickers put on the outside. This is actually part of the fabric of the glass. It's baked or etched into it. So it's called frit when this is the case, when a pattern is etched or baked into glass. And so entire buildings like this one in the upper left corner is the CUNA Mutual building. That ginormous side of the building is all glass, and it is all fritted glass. So on the other sides of the building, they use terracotta bars that go around the windows, like an architectural design, and it also is a shade, you know, provider, so it reduces heating and cooling costs and whatnot. But it also deters bird collisions. And so this building that you would think is just like an impossible death trap for birds is relatively bird safe. Like, you'll still have birds hit windows, but it's much, much less. This was part of our bird collision core program a couple of years ago, and we found very few collisions there. Okay, and all of this is done because people like you and me and our communities feel like this is worth it, right? That birds make life better. And these are changes that we can make that are relatively easy, relatively quick, and relatively inexpensive, and completely worth it. So I have some resources for you if you're interested. The top link there has a whole bunch of resources that my colleagues and I have put together on how to, you know, think about collisions and ideas for window treatments and videos that you can watch and whatnot. There's information about our bird collision core program. Save Our SOS Save Our Songbirds is another great resource. They provided the coupon codes for the products we talked about tonight. And then abcbirds.org is the American Bird Conservancy website that has all the information about window collisions you could possibly hope for. And they have that material threat factor catalog of sorts. So if you go to that website, you can go through all of the different products that they've tested and the scores that they've assigned to them. So with that, I would be very glad to take some questions. I think there may be a couple in chat. Oh, thanks for your nice comment, Shelley. Any idea how we can get the wild turkeys from seeing a reflection on their sliding glass door and pecking on the glass? Do the dots work for that? This is a common question, right? Like turkeys, cranes, cardinals, robins, they all get like that crazy territorial instinct to flush out any intruder that's in the area. And so they'll attack the reflection in glass. And yes, so these dots would work in the same way to reduce those attacks, because they don't see a bird, like it changes the way that they perceive that image, right? So yes, that would work for reducing those issues as well.
Okay.
Any other questions?
If I could ask a question.
Great.
We have two birds, an oriole and an eastern kingbird, who are coming up to the window. They're not running into the windows, but they're flapping their wings against the glass. And this is at a time when we have wood blinds. The wood blinds are almost closed completely, so they're not seeing. It's not a through passway anyway. They couldn't see through. There's no glass or window on the other side of the room. But what are they trying to do by coming up to the glass and just flapping wings?
Interesting. I don't have a scientific explanation for that. I would imagine that they see something that they're curious about in the glass, but they're not necessarily trying to get at with intent, you know, like they would like a tree. I don't know what they would be looking at. Sorry, I can't answer that very well.
Thank you.
Other questions? I hope I can answer them. Yes,
Maybe
I
I
see
can just comment on that last comment, which is that we have one room where the birds do that same thing. And somebody told us that they see themselves and they're doing a territorial thing, like to fight that bird off. You know, they do hit the window a little bit, but it's just that they come up and then they go down and then they come up.
Sure.
And go over and over and over again. And so we assumed it was sort of like a territorial, like they're seeing themselves in the window.
Yeah.
Trying to fight themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Especially with some species like red-winged blackbirds show their red colors when they like are showing how important they are and just like scare off other males, you know? So like an oriole may want to show its like colorful body to do that as well. Yeah, that's a good thought.
Brenna, I have a question.
Yeah.
All of our main living is on a second floor, and we have huge windows that are probably 7 by 7 foot, several of them. And there's a couple specific ones where we've had birds die from hitting them. But everything you're showing us has to be applied from the outside. So we've got inside window coverings, even when those are pulled down, there must be enough reflection that they're still hitting. So am I to understand that really the only solution is something that we could have somebody attach second floor on the outside?
You could consider not washing your windows ever again. No, Yeah, I think that probably is the solution. Unfortunately, is to have someone with a lift who
Mhm.
can come and on our website, this Prevent Collisions website that's at the top of
Mhm.
the list here, I have a list of contractors that will apply these window treatments in southern Wisconsin, and it's possible that they would come to your area, or it might just give you an idea of what kinds of companies you could contact to see if they do this. So, there are like window washers and handyman companies and sign companies that do this in our part of Wisconsin. So if you have like a handyman or a window washing company that you've worked with or has a good reputation, you might call and see if they would do this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Are there any other questions?
Shelley said we don't wash out windows that are 8 feet or higher, and no birds have hit those spots. And like
Oh,
I laugh when I said don't wash your windows, but honestly, that is a good way to reduce collisions, because that dust or dirt or whatever would accumulate on the outside of the glass, and that's what would break up that reflection. So I gave this presentation recently, a couple weeks ago, and that's what one person in the audience said. He said he's not had a single collision since I think he got divorced, and his then wife, didn't want him to wash windows. So he doesn't want to wash windows anymore, and he hasn't had any collisions since then. So it can work. It's a way. Yes. Other questions or comments or things that you've tried that have or haven't worked?
we bought the dots after your presentation, and they actually, you can buy them in rolls where it's about, I don't know, 6 inches wide instead of just the tape. So that's an idea. So you don't have to, use the tape over and over. You can use it 6 inches wide. But you do have to, you have to level it and things like that. So, but it's a good option and I like it. So,
Yeah, thank you. That's a relatively new product that I think they came out with it maybe at the beginning of the year. So yeah,
Mhm.
you can buy them where they come in like bigger chunks so that you can put up more at one time.
yeah.
So
And if
that's
you're
great.
in
I'm
the
glad you like
area,
it.
I see a lot of familiar faces. I can show you what it looks like. But you won't be able to order it by tomorrow then. So it's up to you. But, you know, if you want to see what it looks like, and I can take a picture of my windows.
That would be great because we're concerned with what it's going to look like for us looking out.
Right.
And how distracting it's going to be. Although, could it be more distracting than the little square and circle and bird shaped things we've stuck on the windows in the past?
Yeah.
It'd be better than that. But
I can show you what we did. We accidentally ordered the wrong one. It's more of a design, and now we're going to the dots. So I'll have two options for you to see.
okay, but they don't do it in sheets yet. So it's like you're saying a roll of.
It's in rolls, yeah, because every window is a different size, and
course.
so,
Okay.
And they also make those on a commercial scale you said your windows are pretty big. So I don't know, at some point, if, they make them on giant rolls that they attach to like skywalks. So depending on how big your windows are and what the economies of scale are, that might be an option.
Okay.
Thank you.
Richard said, I read years ago that if first story windows are angled down toward the earth by 3%, it would be safer for birds. Is there any truth in this? Well, I think yes, because if the windows are angled in such a way that the reflection of what they see is not appealing anymore, like if the windows are angled down, it'll angle it toward the earth, right? And not a tree or the sky or whatever. There's also some benefit to not hitting square on. if they hit at an angle, it's more of a glancing blow and they can still get injured, but not as badly. So, 3% is a very exact number that I haven't heard before, so I can't say that for sure, but it doesn't mean it's not true. So, and just a quick mention, a number of people ask about, well, I've had birds hit my window, but then they just lay on the deck for a bit and they fly away, and I think they're fine, right? And as much as we like to tell ourselves that, unfortunately, about 75% of birds that hit windows and don't immediately die later do die. So 75% of those. And so when they fly away, a lot of times it's that they're going to someplace quiet and dark that they feel comfortable to just die in peace, or they have some kind of injury that makes them more susceptible to predation. They have like a scratch on their eye that they couldn't see the predator coming, or their bone is broken in such a way that they can't forage properly anymore. So through a number of different avenues, those birds typically end up dying. Any other questions, comments?
Well, I want to say thank you, Brenna. I think this is a great presentation and I hope people took away ideas. And again, if you want to see any of my tools and you live in the area, I know some of the faces are familiar, let me know. But hopefully this will help you make a decision on helping our bird friends. And, some of it is something you may want to do, just kind of pick through them and see what you'd like to do.
Thank you all so much for paying attention and for the care that you show to birds and all types of wildlife through the different things that you do. I really appreciate talking with a group like yours. So thank you all very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brenna.
It was great.
Good.
Thank you.
Take care.